Welcome back to Ghost Fired Entertainment. I'm your host, Kanan Becker, and today we do another deep dive into Tubi. And real quick before we get into this, if you could do me a favor and hit that like button, because that really does help this channel out so much. So for those of you not familiar with this channel, once a week I go searching through the popular streaming platforms and come up with 10 horror movies to recommend to you guys. This week I went searching through Tubi and came up with 10 horror movies that I think you will enjoy. And with that, let's get to the list.
Is that really your waist, or do you come in two sections?
Two sections. I'm kind of a do-it-myself kid.
Alright, so Vampira Me is a little documentary that I came across. A friend suggested it to me, and I was like, hell yeah, I'm always down for horror movie documentaries in general, but definitely horror movie ones. And man, what a great little documentary and an eye-opener to a lot of different things, because Vampira is one of the first horror hosts, like from way back, right? In the 1960s when horror hosts were first becoming a thing. And in a lot of ways, she was Elvira before Elvira.
Well, I became the girl of the minute. You know, I was the #1 item around for 5 minutes.
After watching this, you kind of go, hey, Elvira, you kind of stole her thing. Like, it's kind of messed up. But it's not that I don't love Elvira, so I'm not trying to talk shit about Elvira. I'm just stating facts, man. And if you watch this documentary, it's kind of an eye-opener as far as that goes. But either way, Vampira was an amazing woman who's very fascinating, and this documentary is so well done. It's something that is really a time capsule glimpse into a different era of horror and where a lot of things began when it comes to horror. So if you're someone like me that's really into the history of horror movies, then this is a can't-miss documentary. So Late Phases Night of the Lone Wolf is a fantastic little werewolf movie that I came across not too long ago. I recommended it before, but now that it's on Tubi, everybody can check this movie out, and I think you definitely should, especially if you're a fan of werewolf movies like me. It has some very cool werewolf moments in it. It's different than a lot of werewolf movies. This movie is about a guy who is an old retired military vet, and he goes to this old folks home, and things start to unravel.
Dolores!
And he realizes that there's a werewolf basically killing all these old people off, and nobody's really doing anything about it. They're just like, oh, whatever, like an animal attack kind of deal. They're old people, like whatever.
This has happened before.
Attacks like these happen all the time.
And so he takes it upon himself, and he's this fucking savage old man who seriously kicks some ass in this movie. It's just a really unique spin on the whole werewolf thing in horror movies in general, and one that if you've never checked out, I think you definitely should. So Devil's Rejects is a film that I think most people are aware of if you're into horror. But I think it doesn't get quite enough love like it should, because yes, Rob Zombie has made some questionable movies, but this is not one. Because this movie is a modern day classic in my opinion. It is so well done, the pacing, everything about this film is well constructed.
You want to start the killing? You best start it right here. Make sure I'm all the way dead. I will come back and make you my bitch.
I'm a fan of A House of a Thousand Corpses, which is also available on Tubi right now. But comparatively, this is definitely a better movie. And in my opinion, in the future, this will be looked at as one of the horror classics that is kind of a staple to the horror movie industry. I know that not everybody agrees with me on that, but as far as I'm concerned, I think it's a brilliant movie. And one that if you haven't watched in a while, I think it's definitely worth a rewatch. No matter what, if it's something you haven't seen, then I think it's a must.
From Universal Pictures and Robert Zemeckis.
You're next, pal.
And acclaimed director Peter Jackson.
We don't stop till the screaming starts, you dig?
So The Frighteners is a very, very fun movie, and one of the last Michael J. Fox movies where he was really at the top of his game. Yes, Parkinson's was starting to get him a little tiny bit. I don't remember if it had come out yet that he had Parkinson's, but you can tell in this movie that he's not quite like 100%, but he's still awesome in this movie. He's a lot of fun as the lead character in this. It's a great little movie that's definitely got some creepy horror stuff going on, but yet it's still very fun and definitely a comedy as well.
You can see spirits?
Emanations are normally confined to the cemetery.
You cannot push spirits around!
Although they do escape.
This is really just a great horror movie that if you're one to relax and not watch anything too crazy and over the top, and definitely something lighthearted, this is a fantastic one. It's about this medium who is going around, basically, he is actually psychic, and he works with these ghosts, but they're basically going around and creeping people out, going house to house, and basically swindling money. It just becomes a really exciting little adventure and an absolute blast, and one that you should definitely watch. Alright, so hear me out, okay? I know that a lot of people hate this movie, but before you turn this off and say I'm an idiot, let me tell you why this movie's on this list. So, yes, this movie does have problems, does have flaws. A lot of it, though, is the CGI. So if you watch this movie as a rightful prequel to the original The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing, I think you can enjoy this movie a lot more, because they painstakingly remade this whole set to match up exactly with John Carpenter's The Thing. They really put a lot of effort and time and energy into this movie. And in my opinion, it would have been a fantastic prequel if it hadn't been for the CGI. And the story goes that they had practical effects done for this entire movie, just like the original The Thing. But then the producers got involved, like they always do, and forced them to change it, forced them to use CGI, because in the 2011 era, we were still totally in love with CGI and overdoing it in every single movie. So that was the situation here. If you could just put the CGI aside, put aside the fact that it's a prequel to John Carpenter's The Thing, don't think of it as trying to hold up to that movie, because it's not. It's its own thing. It is using that movie. It's a prequel to that movie, but you shouldn't compare the two, because that is an absolute classic, and in my opinion, one of the top 5 greatest horror movies ever made. And this is not that. But if you watch this with all those things I said in mind, I think you could still very much enjoy it. Either way, if you're a fan of John Carpenter's The Thing, this is definitely a must watch, because there is a lot of good here. They did do some great things that do add to that whole story, as a prequel should, even though they do fail in a lot of spots. But it's still a movie I think you can definitely enjoy.
Highlander, there can be only one.
Here we are, with the princes of the universe.
So Highlander is one of my favorite movies. Yes, I know it's not the greatest, and some people definitely shit on this movie. I've shown it and recommended it to quite a few people, and a lot of people have been like, dude, this movie's horrible. Like, why'd you recommend this to me? But I think it's fantastic. And it's not exactly a horror movie. I don't know where this movie exactly falls, though, because it does have a lot of horror type of moments, especially the original Highlander. As the Highlander movies progressed, they became less and less horror. But I think this first one has a lot of horror type of elements to it, because Clancy Brown's character, the Kurgan, is absolutely a slasher, serial killer, horror kind of character. Man, he is savage and brutal, and like when his throat gets cut, the way he does that voice, just an absolutely horrific character.
You will always be weaker than I.
And I'll argue with anyone that he deserves to be treated as like a horror villain. So yes, this movie isn't exactly horror, but I think as a movie that no one talks about in the horror genre, I think maybe you should rewatch it again through a different lens, because I think it has a lot of things in common with a lot of slasher movies. But because it's not a true blue slasher, it's got different elements too, sci-fi elements. Either way, I think it's a movie you can have fun with, especially if you're someone like me that enjoys 80s movies. So It Follows is a movie that I heard a lot of people talking about a few years ago when it came out. It definitely had a buzz, but that buzz has died off, and you just don't hear people talking about this movie very much. And I don't really get that, because to me, this is such a well-made, well-constructed, very small and simple and clean horror movie that it deserves to always be in list of modern-day classics.
Wherever you are, it's somewhere walking straight for you. All you can do is pass it along to someone else.
Because it's really that well done. I love the pacing, I love the character development, because so many horror movies don't have much of a plot, don't have much character development. They don't make it to where you really give a shit about any of the characters. They just try to jump scare you all the time. But this does it right, in my opinion. This slowly builds this feeling of dread and gives you these characters that you're invested in, and yet has creepy moments, has jump scare moments. Definitely does not hold back on the scary elements. This movie is definitely a horror movie, but yet they do not try to shy away from giving you a legit story that has a legit ending and is worth a fucking watch.
If it kills her, it gets me and goes straight down the line whoever started it.
So I think this movie deserves more love and more respect, and if you're someone that's never seen it, I think you definitely need to put this on your list.
You think he's dead?
They never are.
Jeepers Creepers.
So Jeepers Creepers is one of my favorite horror movies from the last 20 years. I think it, unfortunately, because of the stuff with the director, it's gotten a bad name. It doesn't get the love it should, but it does still get a decent amount of love because the Creeper is such a fantastic horror character. The sequels were not the best, and that also hurt this franchise, but they're making another Jeepers Creepers movie, a reboot, that has nothing to do with that piece of shit director. And so it's gonna have a fresh, clean slate, but using that cool character of the Creeper. And I'm super excited about that. But anytime I see this movie on a platform, and especially for free, I gotta recommend it because, like I said, this is definitely one of the best horror movies from the last 20 years. I just love the dread that this movie builds, the overall way things look, and the characters. There's so much to this movie to absolutely love. Especially the first half, in my opinion, is just as good as it gets for horror. The way it builds dread and all of that.
What's he doing?
The hell is that? He dumped something down that pipe.
Wrapped in a sheet.
In a strange way, this movie is kind of like two different movies. Each half of this movie has a different flair and feel and style about it. But I think it still very much works, and it's one that I definitely am a fan of. So Silence of the Lambs is one of the greatest horror movies ever made, for sure, without question. Hannibal Lecter is one of the greatest horror villains of all time. This is still to this day one of the only horror movies to ever get an Academy Award, and that says a lot, because this movie is still a horror movie. It has some scary ass moments, jump scares, brutal violence. I mean, it's got all the stuff that you want in a horror movie. But on top of that, it is a fantastic story. It's directed beautifully. It looks amazing.
Most serial killers keep some sort of trophies from their victims.
I didn't.
No. No, you ate yours.
Just the character development is as good as it gets, and the whole witty banter between Clarice and Hannibal Lecter Definitely one of the greatest twosomes in a movie. The way they just play off each other is fantastic. It's one of those movies you could just ramble on and on about all day because it is just that good. And when I saw that it was available on Tubi, I was like, man, it's definitely going on this list. Alright, so Wolfman's Got Nards is the last movie on this list, and it's another documentary. I had a blast with this movie. If you're a fan of Monster Squad like I am and grew up with it and just feel like it's one of those movies that always takes you back, then this documentary is definitely a must. It goes deep into the whole lore, it goes deep into the actors, tells the whole story from the inside out, but then it's also just a really fun journey on how this movie was brought back to life.
First time I ever saw Monster Squad.
I was at a sleepover party with a friend of mine.
It was on HBO.
Every time we go to the video store, that's what I'd rent.
I've been at a bootleg DVD. The word got out.
And how it really never took off when it first started. And yet all of us grew up feeling like we loved it and knew about it. But it's funny because when it was first released, it bombed, man. It just did not do good. But like most of you that love this movie, we all discovered it on HBO or on VHS. Either way, it's a fantastic story on how this movie slowly rose to being this iconic, you know, Goonies level type of movie from the 80s. So if you're a fan of the movie, this is definitely a must. But even if you're not and you just enjoy watching documentaries about the history of horror, this is definitely fantastic. It's extremely well done and one that I highly, highly recommend. Alright guys, that's going to do it for me today. Please leave your comments down below. Let me know if you've checked any of these out and the ones you love, the ones you hate. Also, I always appreciate it when you let me know movies that are available on Tubi or whatever platform that I should check out. And if you could do me a favor and hit the subscribe button and ding that little bell, because that is the best way to keep track of this channel. And when I post videos like this, and I post videos like this usually about 2 times every week, I also want to give a huge, massive thank you to my patrons because you guys, yeah, your support seriously means so much to me. And if you would like to find out more about becoming a patron, the link is down in the description. And like always, thank you so much for watching. Please crush that like button. And remember guys, horror can be fun. I will see you guys next time.